Welcome back. This will be part 6 in the character texture creation tutorial series. So last video we talked about how to organize our scene with folders or groups. So we have we missed the inside of the mouse, so we'll drag that one into that mouse folder as well. So basically we have a folder for each major different body part. And the other thing we did was add more detail to the eyes. If I can zoom in back to the eyes there. More individual layers, how we can add like a veins layer to it as well. And then like the iris detail. And we also duplicated the eye material and then created a different mask so that it only affects the area for the iris and pupil. So this video we're going to talk about smart materials. Basic materials or procedural materials that work really well, but they do have some confinements as far as it's not looking at the geometry of how it has that detail. It's just a procedural, repetitious material applied to that, that form. So smart materials are actually looking at the geometry, and here's where those bake mesh maps comes into play. So one of them that I always show for a demo is the machinery, because that has a lot of good base detail that the smart materials are using. Smart materials are just using generators. We can also create materials from scratch with smart material with generators on them, but I'll open these up and kind of show you how we can use some of these, and we'll go through a couple of varieties of different smart materials. So I'm always going to talk about the machinery one because it has a good dirt dust layer to it. It isn't going to work with every part of this smart material for this character, but we can pick and choose kind of what we want for these different materials. And what I typically will do when creating textures for a character or object or whatever it is, environment, I'm going to use kind of a combination of a lot of smart materials. I like some layers from one smart material, so I use that, and I'll take and pick and choose and combine my own. So pending that you have baked your mesh maps, when you drag a smart material like the machinery one, let's just drag it on top of all my other folders and groups. It's going to roll through the bar and build that material. It's looking at the mesh maps and then applying the material to your character. Okay, so you should see roughly the same preview as on your model. So if your model is a flat yellow with the machinery applied to it as a material layer, then you haven't baked your mesh maps. So, but once the mesh maps are baked, zoom out, it's going to add the base yellow metal look to it, and then it's going to have this other dirt grunge detail on top of it. So especially for characters, I really will not use the metal base layer, so you can just turn that off, and these other layers, dirt, dust, and rust, are actually going to overlay on top of your layers underneath that. So it's a pretty interesting way to be able to use smart material. And we're going to go through and talk about what these are actually doing. So there's a dust layer, and what that does is dirt. So this is kind of lower level dirt layer. Let's turn off the other one so we can see. So here's our dirt layer. And that's adding an overall grungy dirt to the entire thing. Okay. So let's go look at that dirt layer. So we basically have a fill layer and then the mask. And in that mask, there is a mask editor, and these are what's called the generators. So if I click on that mask editor, here's the generator, so I can roll some of this stuff up so I can see more of it. So this mask editor is a generator, and we can choose between other generators or whatnot. And what this mask editor is doing is adding grunge maps. So if I go over here to textures, maybe not textures, grunges, sorry, grunges. Here are all the different grunge varieties that we can add with this. If I increase the opacity of this dirt layer, you can see the real full level of detail. So if I want the character to look really dirty, there's a kind of a good opportunity for it. Now it will miss some areas, like some weird areas like this. We'll come back and talk about how to correct and add back to that. But look at the shirt. That's doing a pretty good job for the shirt there of adding a good overall dirt layer to that shirt. Missed some areas above the eyebrows. It's all right. We'll come back and correct that. So let's increase this to 100. We can see that. So basically this generator is going to be combining two different grunge files, grunge map, grunge rust map. or rust fine. And of those bake additional mesh maps, it's looking at these individual maps that it created for where and how to put that detail. So it's looking at the normal direction, it's looking at the position of the polygons, it's looking at the thickness, it's looking at the curvature, how curved the surface is versus how flat the surface is. And it's also looking at ambient occlusion. So ambient occlusion is how close areas are to each other. So considering these forms are too close or really close to each other, it's going to put more dirt in that area. So in between the fingers, really dirty looking there. But flatter areas, it's not going to be as dirty. So each one of these smart materials will use a variety of mesh maps, and we use its own variety of generators to do this. So what's nice is that I can go with this mask generator, go back up to my grunges, and just replace this. So let's try grunge dirt large, and let's drag that into on top of the top image inputs and replace that. So that'll change the way that texture will look. Now there's different kind of grunge detail there. Let's find a completely different one. Let's say, I don't know, this one, grunge map 13. Let's drag that into our second one and then let it update. So that'll change the way that dirt looks on the character. So the generator has its defaults, which you can drag these individual grunge or texture maps into the image inputs and change the way it is applying that grunge detail. Now there's different spots and whatnot from those two maps. So one thing we can also do is change the balance. Under the image 1, I can drag my balance down. Okay, so that'll change it, or I can drag my balance up. Okay, so it changes that. I'm going to pull it back down some. The second image, I can change my balance up or down. Changes the way that material is working as well. So that's what it kind of makes it even more procedural, is by playing with the balance. Some of them have contrast as well. So let's take the top image and play with the contrast more. It's not doing too much with this one. We can also like randomize these as well. So there's some of them have randomized, some of them don't. So this one has a randomize feature, can randomize where that dirt is applying onto the character. Yeah, I don't see a randomize for this one. There's an invert, so I can invert this also. There's a flip horizontal or flip vertical. So each one of these is a texture map that we're just using in different ways. Above that is the way it's using each of these mesh maps on the world here. So I can take curvature and drag my curvature down some, so you can see how that's blending it away. Pull it back up. I can take ambient occlusion and drag that down some as well. Blend it back away. And here's the blend between texture 1 and texture 2. So there is more of texture 2. You can say less of texture 1. So just using the smart material just as its basis is not going to turn out the best way, and it'll look very repetitious just like anyone else is using this machinery. But now this basic dirt map looks very individual. So let's turn that one off and turn dust on. So the dust will create a layer of kind of dirtiness on the top of objects. So as if this object would sit still in a dusty environment for a long period of time. This is really meant for a character. So dust wouldn't sit on top of a character for a long period of time. But this dust mask also has a generator associated with it as well. And we can play with like scratches, large and small. We can play with the world space, the curvature on it as well. We're just going to turn this off, but that's kind of, you know, ways that we could stylize the look of the character as well. Kind of interesting looking. But also, you know, it doesn't make it look as natural if it's a movable character. So for this one, we're not going to use dust. Let's look at rust. Rust is a kind of a larger scale, like dirty, grunge look texture to it. As default, it's this kind of browny rust texture that's embedded in. If you can look at it, it's kind of scraped away. But so we can change that color for that layer also. If I go to, I think, basic parameters, hue shift, so I can change it to a different color. A bluish color if I wanted to. Luminosity. Okay. Contrast. Maybe less contrast. Okay, let's pull it back to brown color or something like that. Here we go. Maybe we do want it to be dirt. And with this fill layer, we can actually turn off height if I don't want it to be bumpy, make it look like dust. So that's more like rust with the height on. You can turn it off and then it won't look like rust. Or I can leave the height on there and then look at the height range and drag that back some. It's not as crazy. Okay, we maybe can change the height position to negative 0.5. I'll do negative here, negative 0.5. Nope. Height position, we're gonna do 1. Yeah, we want to do 1. That'll push it out, just not that much. And then we can drag our height range back some more. There we go. So it'll look like dirt, but just not crazy looking dirt on there. So it's still on top of it. All right, so if I look at my Rust generator, it should have a lot of randomized ones here as well, so I can randomize that more. Let it update. Maybe I'll put more balance so this first one has a lot more dirt and grunge to it. Whoa, that's too much. Back it off some. Okay, is it just one image? No, it's 2. Right, yeah, 2. Okay, so we'll put the balance up more there. We'll randomize this one as well. Randomize a little more. All right, we'll back it off some. We don't need that much. So I'm just playing around with the varieties and adjustments for what is dirty and what is not dirty. So we can have different levels of this. So within this Rust, I can dial the opacity back down so it's not as crazy looking. Okay, so maybe the dirt, I want it to be pretty prominent on the skin or on the shirt. So I can copy this out of the machinery level. Let's kind of just drag it out of the machinery level for a second. Maybe the other, like the dirt, I want that to affect everything. Right, so maybe I want everything to be dirty or not. So really the only thing in this machinery one that I'm using is going to be, I don't need dust, I don't need base metal. So I'm just going to use the dirt and the rust. So I really don't need that machinery folder anymore. There's my dirt layer. And then my rust layer can be on top of that. Okay. So there's another way we can layer everything on top of another. So now what I can do is turn my rust back on and maybe we'll crank it all the way back up, is to add this to specific folders. So we don't want these on the eyes. I don't want this really on the mouth. I'm going to move my skin up as well. Skin can go above my shoes, all of my clothing items or anything like that. So let's drag these underneath my skin. Let's move this down so we can see it easier. Drag this underneath skin. There's a rust as well. There we go. So sometimes if you put things underneath layers, it'll still kind of affect the normal. So we just want to make sure that this is in, or this even has its own folder that is only going to affect the other areas. So let's do a folder, and then we'll do kind of grime or whatnot, call that. And then in this folder, we can add a black mask to that folder. And then we're going to go to the polygon fill and only add this to the clothing. So we're just going to put it on the clothing. So it's not going to affect the skin or the eyes or inside the mouth or inside the nose. All right, so let's drag these two rust and dirt layers into that new folder. And there it goes. You can see it takes it completely off of the skin there. So now that dirtiness layers is just on all of my clothing. It looks like the character just ran around in mud, but washed their skin off. So we might want to add, some different levels of this rust on top of the skin as well. So maybe we'll copy that dirt, not put it over the eyes and mouth, but just over the skin. All right. And then with this new dirt layer, let's just drag the opacity down some. Let's get off of that so we can see it. So maybe that'll add some spots, some interesting kind of variety to it. drag the opacity down more. So this is another way that we can add more variety to the skin. I can copy this dirt layer again and go to my mask editor, and let's go back down to my generator. Randomize this more. Randomize. Put a little more balance, a little more contrast for this one. So within the same dirt layer, now I can have kind of two levels on the skin. And maybe the second one is even lower in opacity. There you go. So that's some other ways that we can add variety to the skin as well. All right, so maybe all of these skin areas can have a new folder, and then we'll call this one main skin. Skin and eyes. There you go. So we can create folders within subfolders as well. So drag all of these into that as well. Hopefully it's not crashing. We'll let it update. I'm going to pause the video for a second. Okay, so it didn't crash, it just took a while there. Speaking of, let's go ahead and save so we don't lose it. Okay. Alright, so we have our grime, we have our main skin. In our main skin folder, we can put a mask on that, say black mask. And this way, this will just add this with a polygon fill to the areas of the face and skin, eyes, or inside the eyes, and the mouth. So folders are really good to make sure you're only affecting certain areas, which is nice. So that kind of variety of the skin is pretty easy to see there. All right. Okay, so the grime, let's open up our grime. Maybe we want to blend these down some. We don't have too much dirt and kind of dust on the entire character. Let's just drag it off a lot. Normal, let's drag that back some. Or the rust, sorry. Dirt. Rust. We can blend it off a little bit, but still have like some bumpy, dirty detail. There you go. Alright, so maybe we'll go back to this rust layer. Knock it back some. Let's see, rust. Basic parameters. Maybe we'll dial down the height range again, 0.2. Whoops, too much. 0.51. There we go, that looks a lot better. There's a little bit of detail to it, 0.53, but not too bumpy, 0.52. There you go, that looks pretty good. So that way we can still see that interesting kind of detail that we might want to have there. All right, so that's why we can use smart materials to add some more detail. That way in this video we'll come back and we'll talk about like other smart materials such as like the skin and how we can bring veins and things like that back to it. But this video really discussed how to add smart materials and what smart materials are.